Welcome to Top 10 Secret, where we uncover the most chilling and terrifying mysteries. In today's video, we'll delve into the top 10 stories of those who conceal their souls. Shadowy figures hidden behind human facades, haunting and horrifying. Get ready for a spine-tingling journey into the world of the most enigmatic and frightening souls. Story 1. The Soul Collector. Gloomwood was a small town nestled deep in a valley, surrounded by an ancient forest shrouded in perpetual mist. The townsfolk lived in constant fear of something lurking in the woods. They called it the Soul Collector, a sinister entity that roamed the forest, gathering the souls of the lost. It was the shadow you saw in the corner of your eye, the whisper in your ear when no one was near, and the cold gaze you felt at your back. Elira, a young woman who had recently moved to Gloomwood after the mysterious deaths of her parents, was drawn to the stories about it. The townsfolk warned her never to speak its name, never to enter the forest, and never to listen to the whispers at night. But her dreams were haunted by vivid images: twisted trees like skeletal hands, a suffocating darkness, and a chilling voice that called her name. Elira, come to me. On a moonless night, the air grew unnaturally cold. Elira, clutching an old oil lantern and her mother's worn journal, ventured into the forbidden forest. The deeper she went, the stranger everything became. The trees seemed to twist and shift, their bark resembling gnarled flesh. The ground was soft and cold, like walking on decayed corpses. Whispers grew louder, echoing around her. You think you're brave, Elira? You don't belong here, but now you cannot leave. Elira trembled, but an invisible force seemed to guide her deeper. Finally, she reached a clearing bathed in a sickly green glow. And there he was. The Soul Collector emerged from the shadows, a towering figure cloaked in darkness. His face was a gleaming skull, glowing with an eerie green light. His skeletal hands clutched a string of beads made from fragments of human bones. His eyes burned like twin fires, radiating malice and despair. Elira froze as he approached. He said nothing at first, merely extended a bony hand toward her. Instantly, a chill ran through her body, and a flood of foreign memories invaded her mind. She saw visions of him, but as a man. He was once a powerful sorcerer who took away people's pain, locking it away within himself. But humanity's greed consumed him. Betrayed and condemned, he was cursed to roam the forest, eternally collecting the sorrow and despair of others, becoming the monstrosity before her. Finally, his voice rumbled, a distorted echo that seemed to shake the very air. Why have you come? What do you seek? Elira's voice quivered, but she stood her ground. My parents, they died in an accident, but I know they're not truly gone. You have them, don't you? He nodded slowly. Their souls are mine, as are countless others. But you can save them. A spark of hope flickered in Elira's chest. How? He leaned closer, his breath reeking of rot and decay. Take my place, bear the curse. If you agree, I will release your parents. Refuse, and you will remain here. Forever. Elira hesitated, torn between fear and love. But the thought of saving her parents overwhelmed her. She nodded. I'll do it. The Soul Collector handed her the string of bone beads. As she placed it around her neck, a blinding green light consumed the clearing. Pain ripped through her body as countless souls tore into her, merging with her own. She screamed, but it was drowned out by the deafening roar of the forest. The Soul Collector laughed, a guttural, mocking sound, as his form began to dissolve. His final words echoed in the air. You think you've done the right thing? Your parents will be free, but you will see. They are not what you remember. Elira awoke in a decrepit house deep within the forest. Dazed, she stumbled back to the town, desperate to find her parents. But when she saw them, her heart shattered. They were alive, but they were not human anymore. Their eyes were vacant, their faces emotionless, and their mouths murmured incoherent words. They were no more than empty husks, puppets animated by some cruel magic. Elira fell to her knees, sobbing. She tried to call out to them, but their hollow stares offered no recognition. And then she felt it. The darkness inside her growing, voices whispering in her mind, urging her to return to the forest and begin her work. The townsfolk never saw Elira again. But the whispers in the night grew louder, and the shadows in the forest seemed darker, deeper, as if something new had joined the Soul Collector. The story ends with the chilling realization that evil never truly dies. It merely passes from one soul to the next, spreading like a plague. And the question remains, who will be the next to enter the darkness? Story 2. The Curse of the Demon King. In the remote village of Blackmoor, a dark legend had been passed down through generations. It was said that deep beneath the smoldering volcanoes in the distance lay a gateway to hell. This gate was the domain of Malakar, the Demon King, a being who once ruled the human world thousands of years ago, but was sealed away by an ancient curse. However, the curse could not last forever. Every 1,000 years, Malakar would awaken, searching for the soul of a challenger brave or foolish enough to free him and restore his full power. Eric, a wandering loner, arrived at Blackmoor after days of traveling through desolate lands. A man scarred both physically and emotionally, he sought refuge in the village. In a dark, smoke-filled tavern, he overheard the villagers whispering about the Demon King. Despite their warnings, Eric found himself drawn to the tale. A strange voice echoed in his mind, urging him, "Find me. Prove your strength." A strange, unexplainable desire took root within Eric. He wanted to uncover the truth. He wanted to face what the world feared most. Eric set out on a perilous journey to the volcanoes. The path was treacherous. Jagged rocks, rivers of glowing magma, and eerie growls that echoed through the desolation. But the most terrifying encounters were the shapeless shadows that appeared along the way. These specters whispered dark secrets into Eric's mind, exposing the haunting truths of his past. The deeper he ventured, the heavier his soul felt. Yet, his resolve remained unshaken. Eventually, he reached the gate of hell, a colossal door inscribed with strange symbols and molten lava flowing through its cracks. As Eric touched the gate, it groaned open, unleashing a deafening roar that split the air. Inside, Eric stood face to face with Malakar. The Demon King towered over him, his massive wings spreading like a shroud of darkness that consumed all light. His muscular body radiated power, but his face was cold, twisted into a smirk of disdain. His fiery crimson eyes pierced straight through Eric's soul. Malakar's deep, guttural voice filled the chamber, each word slicing through the air like a blade. "Why have you come here, frail human? Seeking salvation? Power? Or are you just another fool ready to die?" Eric did not flinch. His eyes burned with defiance. "I want the truth. If you are the embodiment of ultimate power, I will face you." Malakar chuckled, a sound that reverberated like the grinding of stone. "Very well. I will show you a power you can never comprehend." Malakar did not attack immediately. Instead, he summoned shadows from Eric's past, faces he had long buried in his memories. His mother, who had died in poverty while he failed to save her. His comrades, who perished in a battle where he alone survived. One by one, they appeared before him, accusing him, mocking him, dragging him into the abyss of guilt and despair. Eric collapsed to his knees, overwhelmed by the weight of his failures. But amidst the torment, a flicker of determination ignited within him. He screamed into the void, I did not come here to run. I came here to overcome. A fiery resolve erupted within him, dispelling the shadows. Malachar smirked, his tone taunting. Very well. Let's see how long you can last. Malachar charged like a storm, each strike splitting the ground and unleashing waves of molten lava. Eric, though merely human, fought with unyielding determination. He dodged Malachar's devastating blows, striking back whenever he found an opening. But Malachar's strength was not his only weapon. He unleashed a curse that slowly weakened Eric, causing his body to wither and decay. Every slash Eric landed on Malachar inflicted equal pain on himself. Finally, Eric realized he could not defeat Malachar with brute strength or weapons. The only way to win was to destroy the source of Malachar's power, the ancient curse that bound him. Eric made a fateful decision. He used his sword to carve a mystical sigil into his own chest, one that disrupted the curse binding Malachar. As he completed the ritual, a blinding light exploded from his body, and the chamber trembled violently. Malachar roared in agony as his body disintegrated into ash. But as the Demon King faded, so too did Eric's strength. He collapsed to the ground, his eyes shimmering with the light of liberation in his final moments. The villagers of Blackmoor never learned what transpired atop the volcano. But from that day forward, the molten flames of the peak never ceased to burn. On moonless nights, eerie laughter echoed from the depths of the mountain, as if Malachar had never truly been defeated. As for Eric, his soul was forever bound to the abyss. In his final act of heroism, he had unknowingly taken Malachar's place, becoming the new vessel of the curse he had fought so hard to break. The story ends with a chilling reminder: evil can never be truly vanquished. It merely shifts from one soul to the next, waiting for its chance to rise again. And the question remains, who will be the next to challenge the darkness? Story 3. The Blood Moon Queen. In a desolate, ruined city where every trace of life had been erased, whispers spoke of a terrifying entity, the Blood Moon Queen. Her blood-red eyes could pierce through any soul, stealing it before one could utter a prayer. It was said she was no mortal, but an embodiment of darkness, born from the hatred and despair of betrayed souls. On nights of the blood moon, her silhouette appeared among the ruins, seeking anyone daring enough to meet her burning gaze. No one had ever lived to tell what happened after. Adrian, a professional ghost hunter, didn't believe in such superstitions. He heard tales of the Blood Moon Queen while staying at a nearby village. Instead of fear, he felt challenged. To him, it sounded like an exaggerated folktale. "I'll end this myth once and for all," Adrian declared arrogantly. Armed with silver weapons and enchanted charms, Adrian ventured into the desolate city under the blood-red moon. The city was eerily silent. No sound, no life. The crumbling ruins loomed like spectral shadows in the blood-hued mist. Adrian felt a chilling presence, as if unseen eyes were watching his every move. Suddenly, a figure emerged from the mist. It was her, the Blood Moon Queen. Her long black hair flowed like a dark river down her shoulders, and her blazing red eyes burned like the fires of hell. Her smirk was both alluring and deadly. "Have you come here to die?" She spoke, her voice soft but haunting, like a cold wind slicing through the ruins. Adrian raised his silver sword, but her gaze froze him in place. An invisible force gripped his mind, dragging him into a nightmare he couldn't escape. In the nightmare, Adrian found himself standing in a field of corpses. Familiar faces surrounded him, his family, his friends, all glaring at him with accusing eyes. A chilling voice echoed in his mind. "You came here to save them, but you are the reason they died." Adrian fell to his knees, trembling. These visions couldn't be real, but they felt so vivid, so agonizingly real. "You cannot escape the truth," the Blood Moon Queen whispered beside him, her mocking laughter ringing in his ears. Adrian struggled to wake up, but his body was paralyzed, his mind trapped. She stood over him, her every step exuding dominance and inevitability. "You are neither the first nor the last. All who dare enter my domain become a part of me." She placed her hand on his forehead, and instantly, Adrian felt his soul being ripped from his body. His memories, his pain, even his will, all dissolved into nothingness. When he opened his eyes, they now burned crimson like hers. Adrian had become one of the countless spirits bound to her eternal service. Adrian was never seen again. But from that night onward, eerie whispers began emanating from the ruined city on blood moon nights. Those who ventured there afterward also disappeared without a trace. It is said that the Blood Moon Queen no longer merely rules the desolate city, but is slowly extending her dominion, one soul at a time. And those foolish enough to challenge her, like Adrian, are fated to become her eternal slaves, forever trapped in her shadow. She remains there, in the shadows of the ruins, her eyes glowing like hellfire. She waits, patient and immortal, for the next soul foolish enough to meet her gaze. And when that happens, another soul will vanish from the world, claimed by the Blood Moon Queen for eternity. Story 4. The Eternal Clown. In a forgotten, remote town, the residents lived in constant fear of a sinister entity known as the Dark Clown. He appeared at night, carrying flickering candles in his hands, with a twisted grin and a cracked, decaying face that seemed to have endured countless centuries. The townsfolk said that anyone who heard his maniacal laughter would never return. Mischievous children and lost wanderers were often lured into the darkness, disappearing without a trace. Some believed he wasn't just a clown, but the embodiment of chaos and hatred, a cursed spirit roaming the earth, seeking revenge. Jonas, a cocky young man, arrived in the town with a desire to uncover the mysteries the locals whispered about. He scoffed at their stories, dismissing them as baseless superstitions. "I'll go into the forest during the black moon and find this so-called clown," Jonas boldly declared. Armed with a flashlight and his arrogance, he ventured into the forest despite the villagers' warnings. "If this clown truly exists, he'll find I'm not so easily scared," Jonas muttered to himself, full of confidence. The deeper Jonas went into the forest, the dimmer his flashlight became. The wind howled, carrying strange, unearthly sounds. Suddenly, a chilling laugh broke through the silence. Not an ordinary laugh, but a twisted, chaotic sound, as though it came from a realm beyond reality. Jonas froze, his heart pounding. In the distance, 2 faint candlelights flickered, swaying like they were being teased by the wind. Then, he saw him. The clown was tall, with wild, fiery red hair, a cracked and blood-stained face, and a grin that stretched unnaturally wide across his face. His deep-set eyes glowed red, staring straight into Jonas's soul. The clown held 2 candles, their dim light illuminating his horrifying features. "Welcome," the clown said in a raspy, mocking tone. "Have you come to play with me?" Despite his fear, Jonas tried to remain calm. "Who are you? What are you doing here?" he demanded, his voice trembling. The clown stepped forward, the light of his candles casting eerie shadows over his face. "I am a storyteller, a keeper of the dark," he hissed, his grin widening impossibly. "And you, foolish boy, have walked right into my game." With a single motion, he raised a finger, and the world around Jonas transformed. The forest dissolved, replaced by a decrepit carnival. Torn tents flapped in a wind that carried the sound of distorted music. Laughter, high-pitched, eerie, and dissonant, echoed from every corner. "The rules are simple," the clown sneered. "Survive until the candles burn out. But remember, with every passing second, I will get closer." Jonas ran, desperate to escape the nightmare carnival. The rides were twisted, with broken Ferris wheels turning creakily on their own. Dolls dressed as clowns sat on shelves, their painted faces cracking as they turned to laugh at him. Mirrors reflected warped, horrifying versions of Jonas. His face melting, his eyes hollow, his screams silent. Behind him, the clown moved slowly but deliberately, never hurrying. "Why run, little boy?" the clown taunted, his voice following Jonas like a shadow. "The game has only just begun." Jonas tried to find a way out, but every path led him deeper into the carnival's madness. Each time he paused to catch his breath, the clown's laughter echoed louder, and the flicker of candlelight appeared just behind him. Eventually, Jonas was cornered inside a large, dilapidated tent. The clown stood before him, leaning down so close that Jonas could feel his rancid breath. "Did you think you could escape?" the clown whispered, his grin never fading. "All who step into my domain learn the truth." "What truth?" Jonas gasped, trembling. The clown chuckled, a sound that vibrated through the ground. "That every soul who comes here becomes part of my story." As Jonas screamed, the light of the candles flared, engulfing him in a fiery crimson blaze. His cries were drowned by the clown's chilling laughter, which echoed endlessly through the dark. The next morning, the villagers found Jonas's flashlight lying at the edge of the forest. There was no trace of him, but from that night on, the clown's laughter was heard more frequently. It was said that Jonas's soul had been added to the clown's cursed carnival, doomed to wander the twisted world forever. Those who dared to enter the forest after him never returned, their fate sealed in the clown's endless game. The clown remains there, hidden in the shadows of the cursed forest, waiting for the next foolish soul to challenge him. With his twisted grin and flickering candles, he continues his eternal hunt, collecting players for his dark, never-ending game. Story 5. The Cursed Circus Doll. In a small, forgotten town surrounded by desolate plains, people often whispered about a haunted circus that had passed through decades ago. Unlike any other circus, this one was strange and horrifying. Its performers didn't seem human. They wore tattered costumes, had faces painted like grotesque dolls, and their eyes were empty and lifeless. But the most terrifying of all was a girl known as Marionette, or the Cursed Circus Doll. She appeared in a blood-stained dress, her face covered in terrifying stitches as if it had been torn apart and sewn back together. People said she wasn't a performer but a cursed soul, eternally bound to the circus, living in torment and despair. Years later, a group of young adventurers led by Caleb, a thrill-seeker obsessed with ghost stories, decided to explore the remnants of the circus. Rumor had it that the area where the circus once stood still held torn curtains, rusted chains, and strange sounds that echoed at night. When Caleb and his friends arrived, they felt an eerie chill in the air, despite it being the middle of summer. A tattered banner reading "Marionette's Circus" hung limply over a broken post. No one dared to step further except for Caleb. "I don't believe in these silly legends. This is just an abandoned place," he scoffed, holding his flashlight as he stepped past the rusted chains inside the decrepit circus. Caleb stumbled upon a statue of a girl. Her face was grotesque, stitched together like a patchwork doll. Her tangled hair and blood-stained outfit were surrounded by hanging chains, swaying gently as if moved by an unseen force. The statue looked almost human, frozen in a bowing pose, with hollow, lifeless black eyes. Caleb shivered but couldn't look away. When he touched the statue, a cold, hollow laugh echoed through the room. The statue was no longer just a statue. The doll-like girl slowly lifted her head, her burning red eyes locking onto Caleb. "You've awakened me," she whispered, her voice echoing like the sound of rattling chains. "Stay and join me in my final performance." The circus doors slammed shut behind Caleb. He tried to escape, but every exit vanished, and the walls seemed to shift and trap him. The sound of Marionette's footsteps echoed everywhere, as though she was in every corner. "You will be my audience," she said, appearing suddenly in front of him with a bloodied, chilling smile. "But to survive, you must do as I say." She began performing her eerie acts. Chains moved on their own, and grotesque dolls crawled from the shadows, their movements unnatural and terrifying. Caleb was forced to flee from these nightmarish figures, while Marionette reappeared at every turn, blocking his path. In his frantic escape, Caleb stumbled upon an old chest with the name Marionette engraved on its lid. Inside, he found a photograph of the circus from years ago. At the center was Marionette, alive and beautiful, her eyes bright with innocence. But scribbled on the back of the photo were the chilling words, "Don't trust her. She is the curse." Marionette suddenly appeared behind him. "You shouldn't have read that," she hissed, her voice laced with rage. "I was once a naive girl, betrayed and killed by those I trusted. But now I've surpassed death. I am the judge." Caleb fought back, grabbing a rusted metal shard to strike at Marionette, but she was invulnerable. Each blow he landed only made her laugh. "You think you can escape me?" she mocked. "Everyone who steps into my circus becomes a part of it." At last, Marionette dragged Caleb to the center stage. "You will be my star performance," she whispered. Chains flew through the air, binding him tightly. Marionette danced around him, laughing maniacally, as Caleb felt his soul being drained, consumed by the eternal darkness of the circus. The next morning, Caleb's friends found only his flashlight at the circus entrance. There was no sign of him, and no one dared venture inside. From that day on, the townsfolk began hearing eerie laughter and the sound of chains rattling from the abandoned circus every black moon. Inside the circus, a new doll had appeared, one with Caleb's face, forever trapped in Marionette's cursed performance. Marionette remains there, in the shadows of the haunted circus, waiting for the next foolish soul to wander into her domain. With her bloodied, stitched smile and rattling chains, she will never stop until her circus is filled with cursed souls to perform alongside her for eternity. Story 6. The Moonlit Gravekeeper. In the ancient village of Raven Shadow, a chilling legend had been passed down through generations. It spoke of a figure known as the Moonlit Gravekeeper, who roamed the dark forests and desolate cemeteries under the cold glow of the full moon. He was no man but a cursed spirit, eternally guarding the gateways to the underworld. Wrapped in tattered robes, with a skeletal face and a staff in hand, he appeared to claim the wandering souls of those who dared trespass on his domain. The villagers believed that on nights of the full moon, anyone who entered his territory would never return. The only sign of his presence was an icy fog that crept over the ground and the faint sound of scratching on the earth. Elliot, a paranormal researcher, didn't believe in folklore or old wives' tales. Determined to uncover the truth about the Moonlit Gravekeeper, he traveled to Raven Shadow armed with his camera and a notebook. He ventured into the ancient forest near the village, the rumored domain of the entity. The villagers tried to stop him. "Don't go," an elderly man warned. "He's not just a story. He is the embodiment of death." But Elliot dismissed their fears. "I'll prove it's nothing more than superstition," he said confidently, stepping into the darkness. As Elliot ventured deeper into the forest, the air grew unnaturally cold. A thick fog seemed almost alive, wrapping around him like unseen hands. The usual sounds of the forest faded into silence, leaving only the crunch of his footsteps on the leaf-strewn ground. Suddenly, he saw a figure standing in a clearing ahead. It looked human, or at least, it resembled one. Draped in a ragged black cloak, the figure clutched a twisted staff. The moonlit gravekeeper turned his head to face Elliot. His hollow, empty eyes seemed to pull in all the light around them. "You have come," the figure said, his voice deep and raspy, like wind whispering through dead branches. "You have entered my domain." Elliot froze, his heart pounding, but he didn't turn back. "Who are you? What are you doing here?" he demanded, trying to keep his voice steady. The gravekeeper raised his staff and pointed to the ground beneath them. "I am the guardian of the gate between life and death. Those who trespass upon my territory must face their fate." Elliot smirked, attempting to mask his fear. "Just another legend to scare people. You can't do anything to me." The gravekeeper tilted his head, a grotesque smile forming on his skeletal face. "You think you are still alive?" he asked, his voice dripping with menace. "Look down." Elliot glanced down and froze in terror. His feet no longer touched the ground. His body was hovering, fading, as though he were becoming a ghost. Panicked, Elliot turned and ran, but the forest had transformed. Towering trees appeared out of nowhere, their branches forming an impenetrable maze. Behind him, the deliberate footsteps of the gravekeeper echoed, slow but relentless. "You cannot escape me," the voice boomed, seemingly coming from all directions. "You have been marked." Elliot screamed, but his voice was swallowed by the darkness. He stumbled into a clearing filled with ancient, crumbling tombstones, each inscribed with a name. One tombstone made his blood run cold. It bore his own name, Elliot Grayson. "This isn't real. I'm not dead," he shouted, but the gravekeeper loomed behind him. "This is your fate," the figure whispered, lifting his staff. Elliot felt his body unraveling, as though his soul was being torn from his flesh. He struggled, but the gravekeeper's power was too great. In his final moments, Elliot saw the faces of other souls, those who had trespassed before him, all trapped, all screaming silently, eternally bound to the gravekeeper's realm. The next morning, the villagers of Ravenshadow found Elliot's camera lying in the forest. There was no sign of him, but the footage on the camera revealed a tall, cloaked figure shrouded in fog, and a chilling laugh echoed just before the recording ended. The moonlit gravekeeper still roams the forests of Ravenshadow, waiting for the next curious soul to enter his domain. With his tattered robes and eyes like endless voids, he continues his eternal task of gathering souls for the afterlife. And if you dare to venture into the forest under the full moon, be prepared to face death, or worse, eternal existence in the darkness. Story 7. The Curse of the Pumpkin Witch. Deep in a fog-covered valley lies a village called Hollowshade, where Halloween never ends. The villagers live in constant fear because, on every full moon night, a haunting figure appears. She is the Pumpkin Witch, a skeletal being with fiery red eyes, wearing a massive witch's hat adorned with eerie jack-o'-lanterns. Legend has it that the village was once peaceful until hundreds of years ago. A witch was betrayed and burned alive there. Before her death, she cursed the village. "You will forever live in the shadow of Halloween. I will return, and your souls will be mine." Since then, every full moon, jack-o'-lanterns light up with sinister grins, and the witch's chilling laughter echoes throughout the village. One day, a young journalist named Samuel arrived in Hollowshade. Intrigued by the strange stories about the village, he decided to investigate. Unfazed by the warnings, Samuel declared he would spend the night in Hollowshade to prove that the tales were nothing more than superstition. The Pumpkin Witch? Just a silly legend, Samuel scoffed while speaking to the villagers. This will be the easiest story I've ever written. Ignoring their desperate warnings, Samuel armed himself with a camera, a notebook, and a flashlight before stepping into the streets of Hollowshade on a full moon night. That night, Samuel wandered through the decrepit village streets, the faint glow of jack-o'-lanterns casting ghostly shadows on the walls. The chill in the air felt unnatural, and the wind carried whispers as if unseen voices were calling to him. Suddenly, the atmosphere shifted. Everything fell eerily silent. The jack-o'-lanterns began glowing brighter, their light turning a blood-red hue. From the darkness, a chilling, bone-rattling laugh echoed. Samuel turned around. Standing in the middle of the street was the Pumpkin Witch. Her tattered cloak billowed around her skeletal figure, and the jack-o'-lanterns on her hat seemed alive, whispering and cackling. "You think yourself brave?" she said, her voice both soft and terrifying. "You will soon learn the true meaning of Halloween." The Pumpkin Witch raised a hand, and the ground beneath Samuel's feet trembled. The jack-o'-lanterns scattered across the streets opened their carved mouths, emitting sinister laughter and glowing even brighter. Darkness swallowed the village, leaving only the witch's fiery red eyes illuminating the void. Samuel tried to run, but tendrils of pumpkin vines shot up from the ground, coiling around his legs. "Let me go," he shouted, but the witch's laughter only grew louder. "You have entered my night, and no one leaves without leaving their soul behind," she said. Her glowing eyes burning brighter, Samuel was dragged into a glowing portal that opened beneath him. When he awoke, he found himself in the center of a bizarre and macabre celebration. Ghostly figures and pumpkin-headed creatures danced around him in an endless, eerie festival. Their faces were empty, their eyes glowing red like the witch's. The Pumpkin Witch stood at the center, holding a giant jack-o'-lantern in her bony hands. "You will now be part of my eternal celebration," she whispered. Samuel felt his body freeze as his soul was slowly pulled from his chest, sucked into the glowing pumpkin in her hands. The next morning, the villagers found Samuel's camera lying in the street leading to the village square. There was no sign of him, but a new jack-o'-lantern had appeared on a doorstep. Its carved face bore an uncanny resemblance to Samuel, glowing with an eerie red light from within. From that day onward, the villagers knew that the Pumpkin Witch had claimed another soul, and Halloween in Hollowshade would never end. The Pumpkin Witch remains in the shadows of Hollowshade, waiting for the next soul foolish enough to challenge her curse. With her fiery red eyes and jack-o'-lantern-covered hat, she will not stop until every soul in the village is hers. Story 8. The Cursed Demon Bed. In an old, abandoned mansion perched atop Ravencrest Hill, there was a room no one dared to enter. It was said to house a sinister bed, intricately carved with terrifying figures of demons snarling, massive bat-like wings framing it, and grotesque faces seemingly alive. People called it the Cursed Demon Bed, a masterpiece of darkness and a tomb for the unlucky souls who dared lie upon it. Legend had it that the bed belonged to Count Lucien Darkes, a man obsessed with dark magic. To achieve immortality, Lucien sealed his soul within the bed, transforming it into a portal between the human world and hell. But the price he paid was immense. The bed became cursed, a gateway for the damned. Anyone who dared sleep on it would never wake as themselves again. Centuries later, a young businessman named Victor Thorne purchased the Ravencrest mansion with plans to renovate it into a luxurious hotel. While touring the property, Victor was captivated by the bed's eerie beauty. Despite the warnings from an elderly caretaker about its curse, Victor dismissed the stories. "It's just a piece of antique furniture," he scoffed. "It'll be the perfect centerpiece for the hotel." Victor decided to keep the room intact and marketed it as the Demon King's Suite. attracting thrill-seeking guests eager to experience its dark legend one night. A guest named Eleanor Price, a researcher of the supernatural, decided to stay in the infamous room. Fascinated by the macabre, she wanted to test the truth of the chilling stories. With her notebook in hand, Eleanor sat on the edge of the bed, inspecting its intricate carvings. The demons seemed to watch her, their glowing eyes almost alive in the dim light. "It's just a bed," Eleanor whispered to herself before lying down and drifting into sleep. The moment Eleanor closed her eyes, the room grew unnaturally cold. She found herself standing in a desolate field shrouded in darkness. Before her stood Lucien Darks, his hollowed face alight with fiery eyes. "You've entered my domain," his voice boomed, each word slicing through her mind like a blade. Demons from the bed emerged from the shadows, crawling toward her, their growls mixing with insane laughter. Eleanor tried to flee, but black tendrils of shadowy vines wrapped around her feet. Lucien approached, holding a dark grimoire in his skeletal hands. "You will be the next sacrifice to sustain my power." Eleanor screamed, but her voice was swallowed by the void. At dawn, the caretaker entered the room to check on Eleanor. But the room was empty, with no trace of her save for her open notebook lying on the bed. The final entry, written in a trembling hand, read, "The bed is alive. Do not sleep on it." Hearing the news, Victor still refused to believe in the curse. But after that night, strange occurrences began. Guests who stayed in the room disappeared without explanation. Some claimed to hear whispers in the dark, while others swore the eyes of the carved demons glowed like embers in the night. Determined to disprove the legends once and for all, Victor decided to sleep on the bed himself. That night, he never woke up. When the caretaker entered the room the next morning, Victor's lifeless body lay on the bed, his eyes wide open and pitch black, his face twisted into a grotesque grin. It's said that Victor's soul was consumed by the bed, joining countless others trapped within its curse. The Ravencrest mansion was abandoned once more, and no one dared to enter the cursed room again. The bed remains in the shadowy room, waiting for its next curious victim. With its sinister carvings and ancient curse, it serves as a gateway to a realm no one can return from. Would you dare to sleep on it? Story 9. The Face of the Curse. In an ancient kingdom, there was a legend about a woman named Selena, known as the most beautiful muse in the land. Her face was a masterpiece of nature, with eyes as radiant as stars and golden hair that shimmered like sunlight. But behind her perfect beauty lay a dark secret, a curse she could never escape. Selena was not human. She was a being created from both light and darkness, a duality split between good and evil. The left side of her face radiated captivating beauty, but the right side revealed the grotesque visage of death, a skeletal smile that seemed to devour her soul. One day, a young man named Elior, a poet seeking inspiration, heard tales of Selena from the villagers. Drawn to the legend of her beauty, Elior decided to venture into the dark forest, where Selena was said to dwell. The villagers tried to stop him, warning that anyone who gazed upon Selena's true face would lose their soul. But Elior dismissed their fears. "If inspiration cost my soul, I'm willing to pay the price," he declared before stepping into the shadows of the forest. As Elior ventured deeper into the forest, the air grew heavy, and silence enveloped him. The ancient trees loomed like giants, and a dense mist obscured the sun. He felt a presence watching him, though he could not see it. Finally, he reached a serene, crystal-clear lake in the heart of the forest. On the surface of the water, the reflection of a woman appeared, Selena. She emerged from the shadows, half of her face a vision of perfection, while the other half was a horrifying skeletal mask entwined with vines and darkness. "What brings you here?" Selina asked, her voice like a whisper carried by the wind. Elior, mesmerized by her strange beauty, replied, "I came to see you and write immortal verses." Selina smiled, though the gesture made her skeletal half appear even more sinister. "You do not know what you ask for," she said. "The verses you seek will come at a cost." Selina led Elior deeper into the forest, to a place where cursed souls floated in the air, trapped between life and death. She explained that she was once human, betrayed by those she loved. In her desperation for revenge, she called upon the power of darkness. The price of her vengeance was her soul, split into two, one half consumed by shadows, the other eternally caught between life and death. "Those who come to me, like you, always want something. But everything has a price," she said, her glowing eyes piercing his soul. "Are you willing to give up your soul for your work?" Elior, enraptured by her story and power, nodded. Selina placed her hand on his forehead, and a surge of dark energy poured into his mind. Elior returned to the village with a collection of poems filled with hauntingly beautiful verses. His words moved everyone who read them to tears, pulling them into a world of profound beauty and sorrow. But Elior was no longer himself. His eyes lost their light, and each night he heard whispers calling him back to the forest. Weeks later, Elior vanished. The villagers found his collection of poems, but no trace of him. Some said he had become part of the forest, forever bound to Selina. Selina remains in the depths of the dark forest, waiting for the next wandering soul. Her face, a blend of beauty and death, lures the curious and the desperate alike. Those who enter her domain, seeking love, power, or inspiration, are forever ensnared by her curse. The villagers say that on nights of the full moon, Selina's song echoes through the forest, calling out to those with longing in their hearts. But to see her is to lose yourself, your soul becoming fuel for her darkness. Selina is neither pure evil nor salvation. She is the embodiment of misguided choices and the price of ambition. Her face, half radiant and half horrifying, serves as a reminder that light cannot exist without darkness. And sometimes, the things we seek most lead us down a path from which there is no return. Story 10. The City of Shadows. In a city shrouded in perpetual darkness, where sunlight is but a distant memory, a terrifying secret lies buried deep underground. Whispers of the Bone Guardian Society, a group of reanimated skeletons cloaked in hooded jackets, send chills down the spines of the city's residents. No one knows when they first appeared, but every time they emerge, the darkness grows heavier and more foreboding. The story of the Bone Guardian Society begins in a secret underground laboratory where gruesome experiments aimed at defying death took place. A mad scientist named Victor Blackwood conducted dark rituals that fused science with sorcery, attempting to resurrect the dead. However, his experiments backfired horribly, awakening cursed souls and transforming them into living skeletons, stripped of flesh yet driven by an insatiable thirst for vengeance. The Bone Guardian Society resides in the labyrinthine tunnels beneath the city, where no light ever penetrates. They move in silence, their footsteps echoing through damp stone corridors. Each member has a distinct role, from hunting down the guilty to guarding the city's dark secrets and watching over the gateways to the afterlife. Those who unwittingly venture into their domain never return. As night falls, the Bone Guardian Society begins their hunt. No sinner, no matter how minor their crime, escapes their hollow, ghostly gaze. It is said that they can see the sins of mortals And when they draw near, the blue flames in their eye sockets ignite, consuming the souls of their victims. The streets echo with screams of despair, leaving behind a deafening silence and the fleeting shadows of the guardians as they disappear into the mist. On the city's outskirts stands a derelict house believed to be the final refuge of the Bone Guardian Society. Beneath this house lies the entombed spirit of Professor Blackwood, bound by an eternal curse. Those brave enough to enter are ensnared in a nightmarish maze, where time stands still and whispers from the decrepit walls lure them to their doom. A group of curious youths decides to challenge fate and venture into the haunted house to uncover the truth. Unbeknownst to them, their every move is observed by unseen eyes. Doors slam shut, pathways vanish, and the grotesque figures of the Bone Guardian Society materialize in the darkness. Eerie laughter fills the air as the intruders are drawn, one by one, into a realm of no return. Only one survivor escapes the house, but his mind is forever haunted. He recounts tales of the living skeletons, their blazing eyes, and the damned souls forever trapped in torment. Since that night, the city has grown quieter, its streets deserted after dusk. The Bone Guardian Society remains, guarding their secrets, waiting for the next curious souls to venture into the shadows, never to return. The stories of the Bone Guardian Society, though terrifying, continue to be whispered as a chilling reminder that darkness is not merely the absence of light, but the dwelling place of our deepest, most horrifying nightmares.